Hey guys, it's Armgod. Something very interesting just happened in Georgia. Devon and Levan Saginashvili were finally back at the table together. But this time, the result wasn't really the most interesting part. Because if you watch Levan carefully, there are some very obvious signs that he might still not be back to his best form. And honestly, that's not surprising. This was Levan's first serious test after around 8 months away from hard pulling because of his injury. So yes, Devon managed to beat him, but I don't think that's the real story. The real story is how much strength Devon was able to feel from Levan's arm after such a long break, and how impressive Devon looked against him. And there are a few other pulls from this video that make the situation even more interesting. Because once you see Bacso Digmalashvili pull Devon, then Bacso Saginashvili pull Odin, then Bacso pull Devon, and eventually Bacso pull Levan. Let's start with the obvious one. Devon was able to stop Levan, and considering Levan's reputation, that alone is impressive. But I wouldn't immediately take this as a proof that Devon is now simply stronger than Levan. There is a huge factor here. Levan hasn't been pulling seriously for around 8 months because of his injury, and this is his first real return to hard table work. That's a massive amount of time for an elite arm wrestler, especially when we are talking about someone whose entire game is built around extreme levels of hand, wrist, arm and side pressure. After an injury, you don't just magically return to 100% because the injury has healed. Your confidence has to come back. Your ability to apply force has to come back. And most importantly, you need to get used to actually fighting another elite arm again. That's why I think it's way too early to say Levan is finished. He's not. But he also clearly doesn't look like the completely unstoppable version of Levan that we have seen before. But here is the part I found really impressive. Devon wasn't just standing there getting destroyed. He was able to actually catch and control Levan for moments with his left hand. And that is something worth paying attention to, because even if this isn't a competitive super match, you are still looking at Levan Saginashvili, the guy who has spent years making some of the strongest arm wrestlers in the world look completely helpless. So when Devon is able to stop him, hold him, and actually make Levan work, that's impressive. And it also tells you something about Devon. Devon's ability to read a position and find leverage is ridiculous. He doesn't need to overpower someone from the first millisecond. He can feel the pressure, find a position, and then start building from there. And that's exactly why these practice pulls are so interesting. But then we get another really interesting moment. Bacso Digmalashvili pulls with Devon, and obviously Devon is stronger. There is a reason Devon is one of the greatest arm wrestlers ever. But Bacso still gets the opportunity to actually feel Devon's strength. And that's something I really like about these clips, because instead of just looking at rankings, you can actually watch different athletes interact with the same arm. Bacso is an elite young Georgian arm wrestler, and his results back that up. He has already won major junior titles and placed highly in senior competition. So watching him feel Devon's hand and arm gives you another reference point. You can see the difference, but you can also see that Bacso isn't some random guy getting dragged to the table. He's strong, he's technically very good, and he's getting experienced against one of the greatest arm wrestlers ever. Then we get another really useful comparison. Bacso Saginashvili pulls with Odin, and even here you can see that there is still a big difference between them. Odin is improving, he is getting stronger, he is getting more table experience, but Bacso is still on another level right now. And that's important, because Odin isn't weak. You are comparing him against an elite Georgian competitor. So when you see Bacso control that position, don't just look at who wins. Look at how easy the position looks for Bacso. That's the difference we are interested in. How much does someone have to work? and how much of their strength are they actually using. Then we get one of the most interesting pulls in the entire video. Bacso Saginashvili pulls Devon on the right hand. And obviously, Devon stops him, but this is where things get really interesting, because now we are comparing Bacso directly against someone who just managed to hold Levan. You can see that Bacso is strong enough to actually make Devon suffer. That doesn't mean Bacso is suddenly stronger than Devon. It doesn't mean he would beat Devon in a real super match, but it gives you another piece of the puzzle. Bacso is clearly on a very high level. And remember, he is also much younger than Devon. So if you think about where Bacso could be in a few years, that's potentially very interesting. And then there is Ottari Saginashvili. Ottari pulls Devon with the left hand, and once again, Devon is stronger. But this is exactly why I like this video. You are getting all these different cooperations from Levan, Devon, Bacso, and so on. It's almost like you are building a strength hierarchy just by watching these practice pulls. Obviously, practice pulling isn't the same thing as a competition. People aren't going 100%. There are no rounds, no preparation, no real match strategy. So you can't use these clips to create an exact ranking, but you can use them to understand relative strength and how these athletes feel at the table. And this is the one I was waiting for. Bacso Saginashvili pulls Levan, and immediately you can see something. Levan is getting pinned by Bacso. And Bacso is strong enough to actually get on the table with him and test him. And this is where I think people need to be careful. If you watch this and say, Bacso is stronger than Levan, that's way too simple. If you say Levan is washed, that's also way too simple. What we are actually seeing is an athlete coming back from a long injury day, and another athlete testing him during that comeback. That's valuable information. So where does this leave Levan? I think the safest conclusion is he's probably not at his peak yet, but that's completely different from saying he's weak. Remember what we are looking at. This is his return, comeback. His first serious table work after around 8 months away. His body has to come back. His confidence in the injured areas has to come back. So if Devon is able to beat him right now, I don't think that automatically tells us what would happen if Levan had another few months of serious preparation. And that's what makes this interesting, because now we have a question. What does Levan will look like when he will come back? And honestly, that's the part I'm most interested in. I think he will be unstoppable once again. But Devon was impressive. Being able to catch Levan, especially after such a long layoff, is impressive. Bacso was impressive. He is strong enough to pull with Devon and test Levan. Ottari is clearly strong, and Odin is still developing, but you can see there is still a huge gap between him and someone like Bacso Saginashvili. But Levan, I think we are looking at a version of Levan that is still rebuilding. And if this is Levan at his lowest point after an 8-month injury comeback, the scary question is, what happens when he's fully back? Because if Levan gets his old confidence and strength, we might be looking at a very different version of him. And that's exactly what I'm going to be watching. What do you guys think? Is Levan simply out of shape right now, or did Devon actually close the gap? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe to my channel for more arm wrestling breakdowns. It was Arm God. Goodbye.